Okay, great. So welcome to the session this evening as part of the Apple RTC sessions through the South Wales Regional Training Centre. Tonight's session is going to be all around structuring learning to develop independent learners. And specifically, we're going to be looking at the use of numbers as a tool in order to support that. Now, all of the sessions that have built up to this being our final one of our series within the Apple Teacher session all give you ways to go towards getting your numbers badge or whichever badge it is that you're looking at. So today we'll be talking a lot about numbers as a tool. Please do use the chat window for the session. If you have any questions at all, just fire them in the chat window or feel free to come off mute, put your hand up, and please do interrupt me and ask anything as we go through the session. Our agenda for today, first of all, just a basic overview of understanding numbers as an app. Now, if you've been on any of the previous sessions, you'll know that the Apple suite of apps are really, really simple and easy to use. And one of the fantastic things I find with them is that they all look the same fundamentally. So you don't spend ages learning a new app each time. You actually get a chance to focus on what the app is going to do for you. So you don't have to teach students every time you introduce something new, because they should already have an understanding of the tools involved in creating it, which I think is a really, really good selling point of the suite of apps. We're going to look today at numbers in a very different way to spreadsheets, though. So we're going to strip out the spreadsheet element of things and think about this as a creative scaffold tool to support learning in the classroom. And then finally, we will get creative and start to build some structure and talk about just some of the processes that you can go through and how to build these. And I've got a few examples that I really want to share today, and I'm sure you've seen other examples similar to this, and hopefully you'll have lots of ideas for yourself as well. As always, I created this Apple Teacher kind of support booklet, really to help people reflect on what they're doing with the tools. It kind of now has been superseded by Apple's own Apple Teacher Learning Portfolio. So I like to think maybe I was a trendsetter there, maybe. But this booklet, if I just jump into the book quickly, just talks through how to get started with Apple Teacher. So if you're introducing this to staff or students, I've done this with the younger students as well. It talks through the process. There is a downloadable journal, which I suppose is very similar to Apple's new journal, if you've seen that in terms of the portfolio. But I use it with my students in university as a just thought process. What could you do in the classroom with some of the different skills? And then I've just added in some videos to talk about how to utilize these. So it's there if you want to use it. For the Welsh speaking people that might be on this call or watching the video, it is in Welsh as well. So I've translated it into Welsh. I haven't yet translated it into lots of other languages though. So I'll add it to my list this summer. But I've put that link in the chat window if you wanted to get hold of that. Now, as always in these sessions, I like to link the things that we're doing to some research to just kind of ground what we're talking about. And when I was planning this one, I found this article and links to deeper research around this idea of learning ladders. And it's something, funnily enough, I did when I was still teaching 10 years ago or so, talking about this idea of learning ladders and building this kind of structure for learning. And I thought it would actually lend itself quite nicely to what I was going to talk about today in terms of using numbers as a process for this. So the idea here, and there's a lot more information if you go onto the website, and I'll add that into the chat window as well, is that it's providing that structure for how students can learn. And the idea being that we want students to be independent in their approach to things. We want them to be able to think for themselves. But how do we do that in a way that doesn't just throw them into the deep end, but actually gives them some form of scaffold? So how do we introduce new things? How do we then support them with this reinforcement, allow them to evaluate, allow them to work independently, but also take that learning further forward in new directions, which is that critical thinking and experiential learning type approach, so that they can actually use that learning in new contexts. And this was one thing that came out of the reading. And this is I'm quite passionate about this. It's not to say that the approach I'm going to sort of work through today with you or an advocate is the right way for everybody, because I don't think there is a right way, one way for everybody. But I quite like the idea of this, that it focuses on certain types of learners, maybe learners that have been forgotten because of a traditional approach to teaching and learning. And in this sense, putting children in charge of their own learning tends to improve low to medium performers' engagement and progress. So it might not be right for everybody, might not work for your high achievers because they might want the content and challenge in a different way. But actually, in doing it this way, we can personalize the learning and support all of our learners to try to achieve, which I guess is the goal of most. So feel free to chat away in the chat window if anyone's got any thoughts or comments on that. I know some of the people on the call will probably have some opinions around that and agree with those things, and always important to share those thoughts as well. So let's get started with using numbers then. So this is what we're going to look through, where to start, how to use the different tools. I'm sure people are aware of the different things that you can do with the application, but we'll talk about some of those different things. Looking at numbers as a design tool, so not necessarily always focused on in that way. Usually people think of spreadsheet apps as being to do with data collection, etc. We're going to look at it in a slightly different way. We're going to start to build a different type of learner journey, utilizing some of the features, thinking about multimedia to add that idea of independence so that students can work through things at their own speed, not having to rely on the teacher all the time, but making sure that that content is there to support those students. We'll talk about this idea of one resource for teacher and learner. So you're not duplicating effort, you actually create the teaching materials at the same time you make the assessment materials. So actually everything's combined in one place. Thinking about this idea of assessment and challenge, and then finally, how do you share this with the students so that they can see it and you can see it in order to assess it. So I thought I'd start with just some examples really. So I'm just going to jump into numbers and just show some of these. Some of the earliest ones that I've worked on. This was something I did with my students in university when I started thinking about this as a project. And the idea here, if I just go into the edit mode, is the first page just works as the overview of the project. This is the challenge that I was set for my students. The idea was that they would just put their name on this page, and then they would come up with their project question. So this idea of personalizing the learning from the very start. So they know that this is something that they have to work on. What do they want to focus on specifically? There's then a page given to them for planning. What is it that they're trying to do? And I've started to think here, this was quite early on, there's a video built in, which is if you didn't know how to make a paper plane in the first place, could I provide them with that? Now, rather than me standing at the front and teaching a class of 30 students how to make a paper plane where 27 of them know how to do that already, and I'm holding them back in their learning, why not give them a resource, which is just content driven, that they can look if they need to, but if they don't need to, then they can just carry on with the learning. They then have to create a plan. What is it that they're going to do? And again, the idea here is that it's multimedia. They can add in videos talking about their plan. They can type, write, draw, however they want to demonstrate this. Then a space for them to do their testing. Again, opportunity to add in a video of what they're doing. So the one drawback that I found talking to students is they love science, but they hate having to write about it all. And actually testing is visual. It's, what did we do and how do we show it? So, engage the students, use the tools and allow them to sort of capture that in terms of a video. And then I suppose, although I said it's not really a spreadsheet, utilizing some of the powers of numbers by having a table in there that they can use to collect their data. And then a final step in this, and this was just an early one, just some ideas around like, what have you done? How do you summarize your findings? Use drawings, video. What are you going to do, and what have you learned as a result of it? So just simple kind of approaches to creating that. Not necessarily full on in terms of the research, but like I said, this was probably about 3-4 years ago now that I created this. But what I did was use those tabs across the top for students to be able to kind of see where they're going next with their learning. So utilizing the tab element of a spreadsheet for them to be able to kind of have control of their own learning. Another example here, this was a PE lesson that I did, again, a few years ago. You'll see here the development of utilizing emojis, and actually some of the feedback that I've had, and I've seen other people do similar things to this, the use of emojis just helps in terms of visualizing those steps, a clipboard, because that's the task, and then the examples. So having, in this case, it is someone doing some gymnastics move. your kind of award, that's your final thing, your targets for future things. Again, using a similar approach. So here's the introduction to the content. This is what I want them to do. But with this one, I've added in the accessibility of actually, I just recorded my voice as well. But this was for students where some of them are English as an additional language. So they might struggle to read this, but they can understand spoken. So I just used the accessibility features to just record my voice saying it. Here's a video, which again, just tells them what they need to do. So for those students that kind of need to see what you're talking about, bearing in mind that PE is a very kind of independent activity at the best of times, where you want the students to be getting on with things and working independently, even if they are working in a small group. They can just watch the video of my introduction. Visual examples just provided on the page for students that are not sure on what they're being asked to do. Here's some opportunities, just visual for them to use. Chance for them to upload their work. So just an example at the top, you take a photo of your partner balance and then have a look at it and then talk about what you could do to improve. So you've got this kind of instant reflection model for the students to be able to see what I've done, reflect on what I've done, and then think about how to update it. Yes, absolutely. I can share these examples. I'll put them into the chat window when we get to the end of the session. I'll probably need to put them on a box link. In fact, I might put it out through the Twitter handle. So if you follow the South Wales RTC on Twitter, I'll put them into that. You can download them. So this, again, that partner kind of reflection or peer reflection, chance for them to show off. So just this is like a final piece. These are the things that we think are the best. So they've worked through the process. They then come up with their final ones. And then again, as always, some form of extension. Okay, so you've done all of that. You might be the high flyers in the class. You might be the ones that are really keen. So where next? What are you going to do as a result of this? So just a challenge. Now, again, in the classroom, you might have your students that get to the end with 20 minutes left to go, and then you have to suddenly then deal with those students to push them further, but also work with the students that need help because they're still back here. So having this in this structured way does allow students to work independently, but with support. Another couple of examples just to quickly show you. This was a kind of more developed idea. This was based around escape rooms. So the idea here, again, task page that you're asking the students to complete. This was the overall code that they had to complete. So this is where they would put their page, their answers to this. And then each page just kind of has a practical activity that they had to complete. Some of them maths related. I think some of them were more practical. So this was a Lego build type activity. But again, students can work through in their own time, at their own pace. They don't have to do it in order, task 1 to task 5. They just have to complete all the tasks. And again, it just scaffolds all of the learning in one place. So students can develop their independence. If they want to work away from the teacher, they can do that. But then they always have that additional support here by what is it exactly we've been asked to do. And then the final one I'll show you was actually one that I was challenged by one of my students. Actually, she was going for a lesson observation for a job interview, and she wanted to do something which was a bit more creative. So we designed this together, and the idea here is that NASA wanted them to think about the Mars lander that recently has just landed on Mars. So we designed this page thinking about how to engage those students in the learning process. So again, just a holding page, just designed just to make it look interesting for the learners. The message from NASA, and then in here, the teacher would create a video, maybe in clips, to just introduce the challenge, fundamentally talking about the different tasks that are just on the page over here. And this, again, there's different stages in this. A page where they could talk about who they were. So this is thinking about them as team members. So they had to choose what roles they wanted, what characteristics would there be for each person. And the idea here is to get students to not just focus on maybe working with a friend, but to think about the skills that different people in the class might have. And so I've kind of outlined the different characteristics. So this is knowing the person more than just it being a friend, and actually trying to get them to understand, working in different groups and strengths and weaknesses, etc. Then they go to the planning stage. So they work through their plans. This, again, multimedia. Do they want to do it with drawings? Do they want videos? Do they going to take photos of things that they're doing? And these 3 different areas, so build the vehicle, work out a landing method, and design an app to control that. Same process then, design, document their learning, their build process, complete with voice notes to tell me what they've done throughout the different process. So again, it's hands-on, it's multimedia, it's not writing in books all the time, it's process-driven where students can work through at different rates. And then a final kind of showcase of their 3 different elements. And then finally, those extension activities. We kind of, or sorry, not extension, the evaluation. So we want them to then think about, this was the task you were set. And then can they create something which demonstrates that they've met that criteria? And they're very, very simple criteria. It was a primary school activity. But again, lots of different things for them to work independently through that. So that was the process. And that was kind of how I've built those things, utilizing just the power of numbers. So I'm going to jump into a numbers spreadsheet now and just kind of look at that in comparison to what this starts like. So if I keep this one open and just open another numbers page here, when you first open numbers, you'll notice that it's very kind of spreadsheet based, lots of like tables and you know, different things in here which will rely on formulas, etc. And this for some people is quite off-putting, so they never go near numbers. But when you look at the top of numbers, you'll notice if you've used Keynote or Pages before, the buttons are exactly the same. There's a couple of additional ones. This one doesn't exist in Pages or Keynote, but the plus is still there. All those options to add in the media, etc., to add in those shapes, that's all still on the page. So that student and teacher familiarity is there. So all we need to do is think about getting rid of what's on the page to start from a different position. So how do we turn a page that looks like this into a page that looks like this? Well, the first thing we do is tap on this circle here in the top corner and delete. And now we just have a blank page. So I'm going to delete this one out of the way. And let's start to think about how we design on something that's blank. Well, like we said, everything on this page is very, very similar to Keynote and Pages. So we have all of those additional tools. So ignoring these first 2, unless you're doing spreadsheets and data collection, we're just going to focus on the last 2 here in terms of the media that we want to collate. Equally, we've got our tabs across the top here, and we can just add an additional tab by tapping on the plus here. So if I add this, I can add in a new sheet or new form. We're just going to focus on the sheets for now. That's going to give me a new sheet. And again, I can just delete that, leaving me with a blank page. Equally, if I tap on that sheet at the top, I can just duplicate that page and make as many blank pages as I need to. So I'm just going to put about 4 pages on the screen. So if you're playing along as well, if you're live in the session, great. If you're watching this on recording, again, if you've got an iPad with you, have a go at doing this as we go through, because it'll just help you just kind of immerse yourself in the building. So I'll just pause for a second whilst people are just adding in a few sheets across the top. And again, if people have got any questions, please do jump in. I'm just going to check them out now. So yeah, thanks Bronwyn for that. I think yeah, the personal ownership of learning is really, really important. And like you said, the lifelong learning element, you know, if you feel empowered to learn, you're going to learn regardless of a school day, 9 till 3:30 or whatever it might be. And we've probably seen that a lot this year with students that want to learn and have lost the connection with school in terms of school being the place you learn. I think they've started to understand that you can learn anywhere, and school is just a place where they can learn in a different way, maybe. So yeah, that's really good. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do along the top is I'm just going to rename these. So I don't want it to be sheet 1, that's not very interesting. So I'm going to tap on that again, this time, oops, double tap it so that I get the text edit up, and I'll just rename this one to introduction. I'll keep this just nice and simple. This can be step 1, step 2. And these could say anything. I'm just putting steps in just so you can see like the build. This was how it would work in terms of following some sort of logical pattern. But suppose the key thing is that you don't need to go from one to the next to the next to the next. You could have this really random and they could go to anyone as long as you had a start point and an end point. the process could actually be completely different throughout. But that's how you edit them. That's how you change the text on those pages. So I'm going to build that space type one, just go through the process of how I built the space one. Again, obviously you can apply this to any subjects that you're doing. Works very well, I found, for maths and science, but I suppose that's what I teach most of the time. And PE, it could be for anything that has some sort of process or project work. Oops. So on this page now, then, I don't want necessarily it to be a white background. You'll see if I zoom out, it's kind of endless, which is the nice thing about numbers. You have lots and lots of space to do things. So I'm going to tap on the paintbrush here. And again, similar to Keynote, I can change the color of the background. I'll make it this gray color. There's lots of colors to choose from. If you've not seen this before, you've even got a color picker. So if there's a specific color that you want, you could add the picture onto the page, choose the color, and set that as your background. Maybe I should have done that on every page before I copied them all. Learn from your mistakes. And now I'm just going to start to design on this page. So this is my introduction. This is my setting the scene for the learners. So we're going to say this is about space. So I'll go into my shapes library and I'm going to find some objects in places. Maybe I'll take globe. And this is just about, this is kind of the design element of how can I engage the learners in something? What design do I think would engage those learners with the work? So I'm just going to put the globe there. Maybe I'll put the planet on. And feel free, like if you don't want to do this about planets, if you want to create your kind of learning scaffold about making paper planes or anything, then feel free, go for it. I'm just going to kind of play around, just go through the process, so you can kind of see my thinking as I'm building at the same time. My background here is going to be blue. One thing that I found is really useful, if you didn't know this, before when I was grouping these objects, I always found it real fiddly because I'd be trying to tap on things. If you just, I'm using a mouse pointer because I've got the trackpad. If you don't have the trackpad, if you just tap anywhere on the screen, you see that blue square that kind of zooms in. Your finger then becomes a mouse. If you drag it over everything and then release, you do have that group option. So there's another way to kind of just group things. So again, one of the questions I usually get is how do I group things easily? Tap, drag, and then obviously if you've selected everything, you can group it. There are multiple ways that you can group things. That in the latest update, there's another option on the page that you can group things, but that's the one that I find probably most easiest in order to do that. So let's put the planet in, and then I might put just a vehicle in as well. Maybe a rocket flying up to space. Again, depending on the age of your learners, depends on whether or not you do it in this kind of style or whether you make it more realistic. Another point, because this has come up, I think, since the last session, rotating objects, 2 fingers on the screen to rotate. Sometimes, again, a bit of a pain for some people to do that. Just highlight, if you select the object itself, tap on the paintbrush, under arrange, you now have a rotation section here where you can just tap to rotate it. In terms of specific, move the bar around to get it to be very, very precise. Or you can even type in, if you know the exact angle you want, you can go to the number section and you can type in using the numeric keyboard the exact angle that you want. So that's just a little bit easier, again, potentially for younger learners, but people that have less fine motor control of their hand, etc. Not sure why I've got my rocket going towards Earth. Maybe it should be coming away from Earth, unless it's someone visiting us. I worry about doing these things live sometimes. It's like you can see the inner working of my brain, and it's a Monday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for me. So. Okay, so that's just my intro page. Okay, I'd also then add in some text on the page. So if I just jump in and just add a text box. I'm not going to build a full resource now. Just kind of go through the process of what would you have on each page. So if I just add in text box, and then okay, I'll just welcome to the session. We will be okay, so I've got some text, and I'll make that a little bit bigger so people can see it. Again, numeric keyboard here, so you can just type in the size you want. So I'll make that nice and big. Which makes it a lot easier for you to make that text a lot bigger. I was grateful when that came in. And again, I'm not actually designing a full-on thing at the moment, just sort of showing through the process that I would go through. So then I go to step 1. Again, I'll just change that background color. As long as you haven't selected anything down here, the paintbrush is the quick way to just be able to jump in and change the text, etc., that you want displayed at the top. And on this one, it's going to be my team. So again, just thinking about that design element to things. What do you want on the page? With this one, I'm going to design those space helmets that I had before. Let's just change this so you can see the color as I'm making it. And I think this is nice, again, depending on the age you're working with. Although I work in higher education and lots of the students I have quite like the idea of personalizing their documents. It is a nice touch. It makes you engaged in the learning that you're doing. But just creating something on the page allows them to add their own photo in. So in this one, let's have a look. I think on the other one, I actually downloaded a helmet off of the internet, but we'll see what we've got in here. There's not really any space helmets in here. They could all be American footballers or firemen. So with this, I'm going to take that slight cheat option, should we say, and find a space helmet PNG. Now, one thing I'll say in advance is always be careful when you're borrowing pictures off of the internet to make sure that they are copyright available. You can do that in the more section. Oops, make sure this is a bit bigger so you can see. In your tools here, usage rights, you can change this to be Creative Commons. So if you're doing this as part of a Google search, you can find Creative Commons pictures. I'm just going to borrow this one for now, just to go through the process and just add that into my page. Make it a little bit smaller, because this is kind of like a badge where I want the students to be able to just add their own photo in. Now, one thing, if you've seen the sessions before, one thing that you can't do in this is turn this into a placeholder, because at the moment it's a shape with an image over the top. So again, I'm just going to show you just a couple of little cheats that you can do. I'm going to merge those two images together. So I've just done that, drag my finger to select both and tap group. So this becomes one shape. And then I'm going to open up, so dragging up from the bottom, just about 1 centimeter. I'm going to drag photos and drop that on the page to the side. Did a session earlier on stop motion, which is why there's lots of pictures of that. I'm going to tap and hold on that image and then drag it over to the side. You'll see the green plus in the circle appear, and then let go. What that's doing is it's turning the shape into an image. So now if I drag that image back, do the same in reverse, it looks exactly the same, but there is a subtle difference. If I tap on this one and tap on the paintbrush, I don't have any options other than the arrangement. If I tap on this one, bearing in mind it's exactly the same thing, when I tap on the paintbrush, I have lots of different options. So you can still play around with borders, etc. The one thing that's really helpful here from a student point of view is I want them to be able to add their own photo in. So if I tap on image, I can choose set as placeholder, and that's going to give me the plus icon on the screen. So now, rather than the students going in and tapping on the plus and going to the media button and choosing camera, taking their photo, resizing it, all of those things, now they can simply tap on the plus, choose their photo or video, or take photo or video and add that directly onto the page. So with younger learners, again, you don't have to worry about their tech knowledge as such, in terms of, do they know how to take a good photo? Do they know how to get the photos into the application, etc.? They really just have to focus on tap on the plus, take photo, turn that around so I'm in the camera. I never smile, I don't know why, I always look grumpy in my pictures, but there we go. So it just adds it there, so they don't have to worry about templates or moving things around. It just adds it for them. I'll go back a step on that one. So I'll delete that initial one and then I'll just duplicate these ones. So again, this is just going to be the who's in our team page. Didn't copy. Now these lines again, if you've not used like Keynote and Pages and Numbers before, these yellow lines are really, really helpful for just snapping everything into place. So from a design point of view, that looks off center. That's really bad. And your eye is drawn to it straight away, whether you're a design expert or not. You're looking at it, and instead of engaging in the design, you're actually critiquing the design straight away by thinking, why isn't that up there? Which was just distraction. So again, using those grids, you're really useful just to help you with the design of things. So now I'm going to change this page at the top. So I don't want it to just say step 1. This is actually going to be our team. So the first page is going to be a little bit of information about the team. And then what I did in the example I showed before is just use a table. And I just kind of outlined who was it that's in the team, what were their roles. So again, I'm just going to use this really, really nice and simply. Doesn't need to have loads of columns or rows. And again, I won't put the full content in, you saw it in the example, but just kind of show you the process. Create this, place it underneath. Again, use those snap grids to make it centralized. And then all I just did before is just thought about some characteristics of the people that would be in the different teams. Now, let me just select all of it so the text is the right color. Yeah. It's easier to do it beforehand rather than have to change them all afterwards. So characteristics, description, and then their role. And then whatever roles you might have for the different characters. And then the idea here being, if I jump back to that example quickly, is that the students marry themselves up to those characteristics that you've put in place by thinking about the who has which strengths, etc. So kind of the same process, I've just done it the different way around. And they would think about, you know, who do we want, who's organized, who do we know that's organized, and who are they going to be? And then they just, you know, they become part of your team, etc. So it's a good way of identifying individual strengths within your team. So that's kind of that first page. And then you just continue to build that all the way through in terms of thinking about what needs to go in next. Now, we said about this is really, really important to have that multimedia feel to this. So again, if I jump back to that example page, the next one, although there's no real content on here because that was how we were designing it. The idea here is that you can use any tools in order to design this. So yes, if you want to have drawing on there, yes, if you want to have pictures or videos or even text, if people want to just write other text. So that's why we've kind of left it blank on the page to give students that access. But the key thing here is you need to give them some form of scaffold to know where it goes, because there is nothing worse than giving children a blank page and expecting them to know where stuff needs to go, how much stuff needs to go. So there's a huge difference between having this as your page and having this as your page, because at least there's some context to what I'm asking them to do here. So all the time when you're building, always trying to think about what is it that I'm scaffolding for those students to be able to learn from. So with this, and again, it's only very, very basic, just going through the process. You can just add in some shapes, Mine's always going to be black, which is annoying at the moment because that's the color schemes I've got set up. So let me just change that so it stands out a little bit. So all I've created is just a space on the page with some information that might go above it. So again, just using maybe a text box, create. I can't type today. You know what? I'll do the create your plan here. I don't know why I don't use that more often. I keep moaning about my writing being bad or my typing being bad. So again, just add in those elements, make it a little bit bigger so people can read it, make it bold. So you're just scaffolding where you want students to be able to place things. And again, what I find quite useful here is the use of icons to just highlight what ways students can put this in, because students are very used to knowing that everything needs to be written. And sometimes you have to almost give them permission to do it in a different way. So I tend to just create my resources with a nod to, you can do this in a style that works for you. So I tend to end up scattering all of my resource pages with the icons that just identify, yes, you can take a photo, you can add an audio recording, you can do a drawing, etc. And just add them onto the page. And again, just hopefully you can see the process here is really, really quick and simple because everything's within the app for you to be able to do that design element. And probably a lot neater than I'm doing it at the moment. But there we go. Now, what I tend to do actually, and again, this is kind of the thinking behind my design process, and I'm not a designer by any stretch of the imagination, by the way, but I have started to kind of make my life a little bit easier, is actually create some of these so I don't have to do the design each time. So at the end of your shapes library, and what's nice here is this works across all of the applications is, he says, although I've deleted all mine, I think I would have done, but I have, is you can actually have a shapes library where your shapes go into the end section. And I'm not sure why I've deleted all of mine off of here. I think I reset my device. So ignore that I just said that. I tried to be efficient by saving all of my shapes, and then I seem to have deleted all of them, and now I have a new job to do. But I created some simple kind of icons similar to these, but there's also another one for drawing as well. So that's the process there. And again, tapping at the top, what is it that we were asking them to do? It's not step 2. We're going to say something around maybe getting started, our plan. And then if you want those emojis, just use your emoji keyboard and just find something which might indicate visually that you're getting started. And there's lots of things in here that you can choose from, depending on what the process is that you're doing. There's lots of different things that you can use. These ones are nice, obviously, for that process type thing, and kind of analysis of what you're doing. I'm going to use this one as my plan. There we go. So that's just going to set that at the top and just gives that visual kind of process for students to go through. So again, I'll just pause there. If there's any questions at all, if people have any thoughts or anything they wanted to share. Conscious that I'm just kind of rabbiting on at the moment. Or just give people time to just do some building. Thanks, Bronwyn. Yeah, I think we've both been in lots of those other sessions where they talk about that visual element and engaging people. And actually, I was talking to my students earlier today about designing resources for their own classroom and the personalization element of those things. There are lots of websites where you can download resources and it saves teachers time, but actually those resources you download, are they personalized to the students in your classroom, to the context, all of those things? And although it might take a little bit longer to make your own resources, I find that if I've made something myself, I'm more excited about delivering it to my students. And that excitement in the teacher at the start of the lesson because I've created something that I really think you're going to love is something that equally engages the students in wanting to do it because you're excited before they've even seen it, and that will pay off. You know, the students will see your excitement. I think it's a really, really useful way. And also, if you know that a few of your students have got a very, very, you know, keen interest in something, you can add those little touches into it, and it will all be recognized. Children are very good at picking up on those fine details, and they will really appreciate it. They may never say they appreciate it, but I'm telling you now, inside, they definitely do appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to show you one last thing on here. One of the things that we talked about at the very start was this idea of kind of self-evaluation, children taking ownership of their learning. And there's something very simple that you can do within Numbers using some of the spreadsheet tools, but just to support students of any age to just do some visual kind of reflection. So I'm just going to add this in. It's just in using a table. I'm just going to make this very, very basic. So I'm just going to add my table onto the page. I'm just going to change that background again. Oops. Just so it shows up a little bit easier. One thing I've learned about working online is working black background with white is easier for people to see. So hopefully that's something that people can see a little bit easier. I'm just going to change this because it doesn't need to be quite as big, so I'm not going to have all of those tables. Just going to make this nice and simple. And again, because I've changed my background, I need to change my text color. And again, you can make this very complex or you can make this very easy. So I'm just showing you the process. You can make this as complex as you need to. So I'm just going to add in a question here. Have you considered the user in your design? So just a question that would be asked to the students. And then over here, you can have this kind of self-assessment thing. So what I'm going to do is, rather than just having this as they would type yes or no, we're going to have it as conditioned highlighting. And again, the reason for this is, and I found this out working with students when I was still a PE teacher, doing examine subjects, was just visual kind of coding to them that they can see where they're at with things. So yes, they could write yes in the box, but text doesn't necessarily show you that the response or that visual overview of what you're doing, but color can definitely help with those things. So I'm going to highlight the box, tap on the paintbrush, and I'm going to go to format. Oops, I'm not. I'm going to go to cell, sorry, and go to add conditioned highlighting. Now, this is something which, you know, there's so much you could learn about doing this in terms of spreadsheets, but like I said, I'm going to keep this really, really simple. When you go into this, you can have lots and lots of different things. So, you know, is the number that goes in the box equal to such and such, greater than such and such? Or you can actually just have this as a very, very simple blank box. So if it has something in it, it's a yes. If it doesn't, it's a no. I'm going to choose the text one. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to just go to the blank one. So if this is not blank, so if you've made a mark in it, then I can have this show as green. And this is the simplest way. This doesn't necessarily work for the question I've put in, but I'm just going to show you the process. So that's created this as a cell rule for this box. And then this is how it works. If I tap in the box and just put anything in the box, doesn't matter if it's a letter or whatever, when I then come out of it, because there is something in the box, it changes to the color green. And you can set all of those different rules for these things. Now, in this case, that rule doesn't necessarily work, because I want this to be text. So I'm just going to get rid of this rule for a second. I'll change this to a text rule. And if the text is yes, then color it in green. Now, what's nice here, and again, there's a range of people on this call from different parts of the world. In Wales, we have a coding curriculum or computational thinking as part of our curriculum that goes across all subjects. And this is just really, really basic introduction to some computational thinking processes, cause and effect. If you do this, this is a result. So again, when you're, this could be a session in science, but I could talk about, computational thinking processes. So now when I type yes in the box and then tap out, is going to turn that green. Equally, you can add all sorts of rules into this. So if I can add another rule, if the text is no, then I want it to go red. Done. So this is all for the same box at the moment. You just copy and paste it to all of them. So again, if I just type in here no. Oh, I've messed this up because I put the additional rule at the very top of everything, which is if anything's in the box, it's going to go green. So I don't want this one. There we go. And you can see it's changed to red this time. So again, this kind of self-assessment thing, whatever questions you want here, whatever their answers might be, and then visually they could see this. I've done it very basic, yes, no type questions. It could be more complex than this. It's not necessarily that it's marking it for you, although it technically is, but you would have to have put the exact answer in. It's not going to analyze their answer and say whether it's right or wrong. So you have to be quite simplistic in the approach here. But then, like I said, you know, for those people that are like maths and equation wizards, there is so much extra you could put into this if you wanted to, from that sort of numbers thing, etc. Equally, if you were doing something like a science experiment and measuring distances, you could change the distances, the times, all sorts of things. But it's a really, really nice step for that self-assessment. So we'll add this page at the top. Instead of it just being step 3, it's now going to be self-assessment. And there we go. We're kind of starting to build that. In fact, let's add in an emoji because we've talked about them already. Just get that into the right place. Bring our emojis up and find a nice self-assessment type. I do this and then I think there's so many emojis on here. I could be here forever finding the right emoji to add in for this. And now I'm lost in a horrible world of emojis. Do you know what? It's going to be a trophy. There we go. But again, the useful kind of element of having that visual thing on the page. So there we go. Hopefully you've seen through the process in terms of how to build these pages. Hopefully that's been of use. That's just my kind of build process. Apologies for you seeing the kind of inner workings of my mind as I built through that today, but hopefully that's shown you the process that I go through. And again, just to kind of go back to one of those previous ones in terms of what that then can look like. And it's not that it's taken me a huge amount longer to do this. It's just really having that kind of idea in your head of what you're trying to build as you go through. And it is just a case of a scaffold for the students in order to understand those things. That additional idea here of having those videos in, just again, support those students in what they're creating. So again, just a little video here that just supports those students to work independently. They don't have to rely on the teacher to reiterate processes over and over again, but does definitely give them an opportunity to work away from the teacher if that's how they want to work. And one thing I suppose I found this last few weeks is that as students go back to the classroom, there is that idea that teachers kind of are back in control again, and you work at the teacher's pace. Yet lots of students, and I'm not saying all students by any stretch, but lots of students have enjoyed the ability to work at their pace, to go ahead because they get it and they understand it and they want to go to the challenge, or to be able to watch things numerous times because teachers have provided them with videos and the student didn't quite understand it the first time can watch the video a second time. And if we take that away and just have the teacher doing all of the work again at the front, I think we're denying some of our learners, not all, some of our learners, that opportunity to work in a way that works best for them. So I'm a big advocate of those students because I think sometimes they're the ones that get forgotten in the grand scheme of things. But that's just my opinion. I'm not saying that's how education should be. Okay, so just to kind of finish off, if you haven't already taken your numbers badge, hopefully in the session today, you will have learned lots of the skills. So please do check out the Apple Teacher site for more information on this. There's lots and lots of information in there talking about the different processes of what to do being an Apple teacher, etc. So that's the Apple Teacher Learning Center. Useful as much for those additional skills that you might learn that we might not have shown you today, but equally jump into it because there's so many resources in there that have just been updated to show you different approaches, different ideas for doing things in the classroom. So, you know, I jumped into it again today, and there's things on there that I hadn't seen before. So it's really, really useful. And the Apple Teacher Badges really do kind of take you through that learning process for a teacher. Yeah, thanks, Bronwyn. So just backing me up on that, that's really useful. Equally, this is our last session of this block, but there are more Apple RTC sessions as part of the kind of online learning that's been taking place recently. So I've just placed a link in the chat window to the RTC UK site. The benefit, I guess, being at the moment, you don't need to be in the UK to access these things because lots of them are online at the moment. So please do jump into that and check out some of those other things. And as always, if you have done anything and you want to share it today, please do tag Apple Teacher, Apple RTC, and us at South Wales RTC with anything you've created. I'd love to see those things. And I will put up both the link to this recording and also a box folder with the resources that people have asked for as well, in terms of those numbers spreadsheets that I've created. So hopefully that's been of use. Thanks everyone for joining in, and I hope you all have a pleasant rest of your day.